Welcome to Permission to Thrive. I'm your host, Suzi Lula. As a spiritual therapist for over 20 years, I have the honor and privilege of ushering women and mothers just like you on a journey from simply surviving to powerfully thriving. I also have the honor of raising our son, Will, who is now a young adult, with my longtime partner, Jamie. So I'm right there on the journey with you. Consider this your personal sanctuary, your space to meet your heart, embrace your messy, and come home to your most authentic, extraordinary self. My hope is that you leave resourced and inspired because you are here to shine. Welcome to Permission to Thrive. Welcome, everyone. You are going to love today's episode with Heather Chauvin. I've been so excited about having her on. So let me introduce her. First of all, Heather Chauvin is a leadership coach who helps successful women courageously and authentically live, work, and parent on their own terms. Who does not want that? Heather started her career as a social worker, helping adults understand children's behavior. But it wasn't until 2013 when a stage 4 cancer diagnosis pushed her to take a deeper stand for change, uncovering how cultural expectations sabotage our dreams. She's been featured in Forbes, Entrepreneur, Real Simple Magazine, Mind Body, Green, Google, and more. When Heather isn't working, you will find her living out what she teaches, which may include kayaking Alaska, snowboarding, hiking, or anything else that challenges what she believes is possible for herself while taking her kids with her. Life is full of opportunities. It's time to feel alive. In this conversation, we talk about how her health diagnosis was Heather's wake-up call to truly live, why it's important for women to focus more on energy than on our time, the power of feeling good, why we can no longer pretend we don't have time to take care of ourselves, how learning to be emotionally uncomfortable is your portal to transformation, time freedom, how to sell your value, not your time. This conversation is so rich. It is packed with so many takeaways that I know you will want to return to it over and over and over again. Sit back. This is your time, your sanctuary. Relax and enjoy. So welcome, Heather. I am so happy to have you. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a very long time now. So welcome.
Thank you. I am so excited. I feel like this is I don't know, we've known each other for a really long time, like when I was in the beginning phases of trying to figure all this out.
Yes, and that is one of the biggest reasons why I've been so excited about having you on. I want to share how Heather and I met each other. I was speaking at, I want to say it was Dr. Shefali's very first Evolve conference, and we opened it up to a Q&A. And I'll always remember exactly where you were standing in the room. You were the first person to ask a question, and your question was all about self-care and why it's so important and why women don't give ourselves permission to take care of ourselves. And from the very first phrase out of your mouth, I was like, a woman after my own heart. I felt such a kindred spirit with you. And so it's really great to have someone so like-minded here. I know this conversation is going to be amazing.
I'm excited.
Yeah. So let's just jump right in. Obviously, my podcast is called Permission to Thrive. And I always like to start with, what do you think of when you hear the word thrive? What does that word mean to you?
I think my relationship to thrive now is very different than it used to be. So it can be abundance, it can be extra. For me today, it's about feeling really good. For me, back in the day when I had no evidence of what thriving meant, it felt luxurious. It felt impossible. That was never going to happen in this lifetime for me because that's not the way my mother and my grandmother and my lineage lived. And so today it feels simple. Thriving is definitely about permission. And I'm sure we're going to get into that, but it's just simply like feeling good.
Well, you're taking the next question words out of my mouth because I called it permission to thrive for a reason, because I find that it's so challenging for us women to give ourselves permission. And you just alluded to the reasons in your lineage, which I think so many listeners are going to relate to when you say your mother, your grandmother, it just wasn't in your lineage. You didn't see it modeled.
Mhm.
I guess there's two questions here. One is, why do you think it's so challenging for women to give ourselves permission to thrive? And just anything about your own personal journey, because you alluded to that, would be amazing to hear about.
Yeah. So it's actually going to be 10 years this December. I was diagnosed with a stage 4 sporadic Burkitt's lymphoma. And the interesting part about that is I was already on a personal development journey previous to that. So 9 years before my diagnosis was when I got into personal development. That when I became a mother, that was my first spiritual awakening. When I looked at my son, I was young, I was 18 years old. When I looked at him and I thought, I already feel like I'm failing and I don't want to become a statistic. But there was always this like deeper inner part of me that knew I needed to take care of myself. So here I am at the age of 18, trying to figure out who I am, and now headed into my 20s where everyone's like, live your best life in your 20s, figure out who you are, travel the world, explore, do all these things. Don't worry, you're just trying to figure out who you are in your 20s. And I'm like, well, I've bypassed that. But I remember still having desire, right? Desire to travel, desire to be educated, desire to do certain things. And then getting this cultural feedback, you're a mother now, you don't get to choose that because this is all about your son. And I was like, yes, and yes, it is about my child. And if I feel better, doesn't that benefit him too? Intellectually, in my being, I already knew that. And then fast forward, as I'm trying to be a good, right? Like the title of my book is Dying to Be a Good Mother, because I was literally killing off parts of myself to be good for other people, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, constantly abandoning my own needs. So when my physical body started dying, like cancer showed up in my body, I was done. I was like, I have been secretly taking other people's advice because I was so afraid of failing as a mother that I am now done suffering. Like I remember like checking the box and I'm like, I no longer am going to respect the opinions of others when it's putting my health, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual, or somebody else that I care about, putting their health in jeopardy. And that permission box was something I already knew, but I just had to step more into it.
Wow. I want to slow this down for a moment because I think every woman on planet Earth needs to hear what you just said. And I'm hoping that every woman listening right now can relate in some way, shape, or form to what you're saying. I think I'm hearing you say that there was places inside of you that knew that you were dying off when you became a mother. You knew it on some level of your consciousness, and yet the feedback that you heard from culture is no, now that you're a mom, you don't get to travel. You don't get to explore and see who you are. You don't get to really live all parts of yourself live. And you also said that deeper down, though, you had this inkling, you knew, if I'm alive, if I'm living to my fullest, wouldn't that benefit my child? So I just want to reflect that to everyone listening, to ingest this, to allow that to seep into your heart, because I know from working with so many women that we all have that inkling. And so then you're talking about this permission. How do we follow our own inkling, our own intuition when we're bumping up against this? It's going to be selfish. You can't do this. So how did you do that?
Yeah. Wow. I'm like, wow, because it's still a daily challenge in the sense that we read all these books. I'm looking over to the left because there's like so many books over here. They're all saying the same thing, except different language. And at the end of the day, everyone's saying the secret you're searching for is to feel good. The secret you're searching for is to a return to love. The secret is alignment. But when you think about how we've been raised, when you think about cultural expectations, no one is ever like, what do you want? Who do you want to be? Even our children. My oldest is 18. I know your son is a few years older, a year older. And now they go out into the world and everyone's like, what are you doing next year? Who do you want to be? What? And I'm just like, stop asking these outdated questions. I talk to adults on a daily basis that still don't know who they want to be. And the whole point of that is we're constantly seeking, but we're putting pressure on these kids of what do you want to do? And then what does the child do? Because they've been conditioned that adults are smarter than them and adults know what they need to do. So they look up to the adult and it's like, well, who do you want me to be? And the adult will say, you need to be a doctor. You need to go to law school. You need to get post-secondary education and you need to do it next year or I'm not paying for it. You also need to do it next year because if you don't, you're going to pay me rent or I'm going to kick you out, blah, blah, blah. Like, what do you want to do? And that is incredibly stressful. And so the unlearning of that and really giving ourselves permission, for me personally, it was when I was diagnosed where I'm like, I want to feel alive. I want to feel energized. I want to feel nurtured. I want to feel excited. And then I started reverse engineering that. So I'm like, what is going to allow me to feel alive? Well, when you first start this journey, you don't know because maybe you've never felt that way. And I remember when I started, I was home in between treatments for my cancer like I'm taking ownership of it for cancer. And I remember being home and I was like, of course, depleted. I was at my wit's ends and I was in the bathroom because that's where we all have our nervous breakdowns. And I was in the bathroom in fetal position and I'm like, my brain and my nervous system is in a state of fight or flight. And I'm like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I'm going to die. Like I'm repeating this essentially mantra to myself. But I was smart enough to know that's not what I want. That's just the loop that my brain is stuck in. And then I got my brain to shift to, how do you want to feel? How do you want to feel? How do you want to feel? And I'm like, I want to feel alive. I want to feel alive. So then I start repeating, I want to feel alive. So then I'm asking myself, what do you need to feel alive? I started becoming this detective and just acting as if. And I'm like, well, I think an alive person would get out of bed tomorrow. I think an alive person would take a shower. I think an alive person might go for a walk. And I had to start acting as if. And then in the future, it was just rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. It was like the universe was saying, you keep living and acting and saying you're not worthy of feeling good. You don't deserve it, just based on my internal dialogue and how I was living my life. All right, I'm going to put your money where your mouth is. I'm going to show you. And then I was like, oh, okay, now I have to act as if. And once I started getting the energy back and I was like, oh, it's working. It's working. There's more evidence of this. I've just been doing that ever since.
Oh my gosh, you have like literally laid out a roadmap that we can all follow. So I love the term reverse engineer. I love that you chose to reverse engineer. So if I kind of work backwards from where you started, you talked about the tremendous amount of pressure that our younger generation is under. We are probably the first generation that has the power, the potential to shift the generational patterns before us of indoctrination into what do you do? And so your doing equals your worth. Your doing equals your value. As mothers, that is how we are indoctrinated. You mentioned wanting to be a good mother because my child is evidence of my worth. So if my child is in law school, I'm worthy. If my child graduates from law school, I'm even more worthy. So this idea that you're talking about of really having the courage, it's such a courageous journey. Like you said, we read in all the books. It's so conceptual in the books.
Yeah.
That's why I just love doing this podcast, is because if there's anyone listening right now and you're like, okay, I've read it in the books, but now I'm going to be a scientist in my own life. There is such a mental health crisis going on for our younger generation. The way that we can alleviate this crisis is to alleviate it within ourselves first.
Yes, we need to become the adult that we most desire our children to be. It is much easier to blame children instead of leading children. I remember when I got started, I never wanted to become my mother. And I also never wanted my child to feel the way that I felt emotionally. And I realized over time, as I began to heal and to coach and work with people, but also as my son is now at the exact same age that I was when I had him, but also putting myself in my mother's shoes when I was that age, I have so much compassion for her now of like, how did you even do that considering the situation that you were in? I think there's so much shame and guilt and just emotional isolation of it feels too overwhelming to me and I don't even know where to begin. Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you're saying, because before we started this recording, you asked, what would I most want my listeners to receive, which was such a gracious question in the first place from you. And that's what I said, is like anyone listening to know that you are not alone. I don't know about you, but when I had my son, I had also been on a personal growth path for many years, had no idea it was going to be as challenging as it was. And even though I'm immersed in these teachings, I felt very alone.
Yeah.
And so, for anyone listening, first and foremost, I want you to hear that you are not alone. And I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying. It isn't that we aren't willing and even desiring to do the quote work. It's that often we don't know where to start and what it looks like and what it feels like. Like you said earlier, you wanted to feel good. And then you were asking yourself, do I even know? Did I ever know? And
Mhm.
so, this idea that you're speaking of leads me into your podcast, because your podcast is called Emotionally Uncomfortable. For anyone who's watching this on YouTube, you can see on the screen behind, Emotionally Uncomfortable. You were saying this earlier, it can be very threatening to be a woman and stand in our own ideas when we're bumping up against the ideas of culture. It can feel very overwhelming and threatening. But I
Mhm.
would love for you to speak to anything around your relationship with emotions and why you call your podcast Emotionally Uncomfortable, or
Yeah.
any of the things you're hearing. Go for it.
So it was about a year ago in January where I actually rebranded the podcast, and the podcast was called Mama's in Control. And I was podcasting for 8 years at that point. And my team is like, why are you doing this? This is what you're known for. And I thought there's something inside of me. There's just a next evolution. I said, the conversation is not changing, but I am now attracting women who want to focus on business. I'm also attracting people who still want help in parenting. So I'm like, am I a business coach or am I a parent coach? Like, who am I? Right. So I was having I'm calling it identity crisis.
Mm.
But at the same time, I was going through an identity crisis in my parenting, that my son, who my oldest is, who I would probably say that I was the most codependent with because it was just him and I for so long. And the other two are 13 and 10. And I just have different relationships with them. We're all really close and connected, but it's just different. Who am I without mothering? Who am I without him? And he's going to go off into the world and figure out who he is. And there's resistance and he's trying to figure out who he is. And that I was like, but I am so much more than a mother. So I'm like, I'm going to drop the mom. And I'm like, at the end of the day, what am I trying to teach women? They want joy. They want freedom. They want ease. They want abundance, but they won't feel their feelings. And if we want joy, we have to feel the grief. We have to feel the grief of letting go of our little boy. We have to feel the grief of who and what we think our children's future is supposed to look like. We have to feel the grief of our old selves 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And that is emotionally uncomfortable. And so I'm like, let's just call it for what it is. If you want to live your quote unquote best life, you want to feel alive and energized and abundant, you better be willing to get emotionally uncomfortable, because this is like a rebirth. And I've seen it again and again with my clients where they're circling around. Like, that is the busyness. That's the people pleasing. That's the, I don't have time for this. That's the intellectualizing everything. I'm trying to stay positive. And it's like, feel it, jump in. You might fail, you might not. We don't know. There's no guarantees. And when they're in it, they're like, I always call it excited shitless, I think I call it, where you're like, oh my God, this is so exciting, but I want to vomit, crap my pants, because you're in it. That's the emotionally uncomfortable, messy middle. And the last thing I want to say about this is it's very trendy in our space to hear we can do hard things. I hear lots of people saying it, and I thought, yeah, but I've been addicted to hard my whole life. I've been addicted to suffering my whole life. So I needed to change it for myself. And I thought I could do emotionally uncomfortable things, because it is not hard to send an email to someone. That email I've been resisting avoiding might be a pitch email. It's not actually difficult to do. It's just emotionally uncomfortable. So when I started to like put a reframe that everything was just emotionally uncomfortable, it doesn't take more time. It could literally take 10 minutes. So when I was like, this is emotionally uncomfortable, I was like, oh, I'm just uncomfortable. Okay, I must be growing.
I love that. And I love what you're saying is about the messy middle. I use that phrase myself, and I loved talking about the messy. I'm kind of obsessed with the soul and the spirit. And
Yeah.
what I know is that the soul doesn't resist that messy middle. Like the soul, when we took on a body, we came through childbirth. So when the soul is taking on a body, it already knows there's going to be some messy here. Like right from the get-go, it's kind of messy.
Yeah.
And our culture is the part that teaches us resist that messy middle.
Yeah.
To have a relationship with our emotions, just say, yeah, this is uncomfortable. It really creates an empowered relationship with our emotions, because I think it's such an injustice and disservice that culture teaches us really to be afraid of our emotions,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so what you're speaking of is emotional empowerment and emotional intelligence. And I know you speak a lot about emotional intelligence, and it leads me to my next question. Another area that you speak a lot about is valuing our energy more than valuing our time. So could you speak to why that has become such a lighthouse for you of teaching us to value our energy?
So I think time, like in general, time is a man-made construct, right? And if I am, again, going to get my value from my to-do list and how much I can get done in a certain amount of time, my life is revolving around these 24 hours in a day. My projection is onto time. But this goes back to, how do I want to feel? And when I started 10 years ago, when I was doing like, how do I want to feel? I want to feel alive. What do I need to do to feel alive? I created this concept called energetic time management. And it was, what specific actions do I need to take that are in alignment with how I want to feel? And now I'm going to put those on the calendar, but I'm going to put that on the calendar first. So if aliveness to me, and I'm like, what would allow me to feel alive? And at the most basic, it is going for a walk every day. I'm putting the walk on my calendar first, before work, before family, before everything else. But culturally, we've been taught to put work and family and all the doctor's appointments for everybody else on the calendar first. And then the extra that we have, we're just going to squeeze in time for ourselves, which most of the time you're going to be so tired that you're just not even going to do anyways. And so there's always going to be an endless to-do list. And so I've retrained my brain. Put yourself on the calendar first, and then you have enough energy to fill yourself up to sustain for all these things. But since I've been at this for so long, and I've been using like, how do I want to feel as my guidepost, it's been very interesting to watch, because there's like an advanced level of ETM, which is, how do I want to feel when I'm talking to somebody? I can't put on my physical calendar, right? But I know that I want to feel connected to my children, and I'm annoyed, right? I feel like I don't have time. I didn't get good sleep. We got to run out the door. but how can I use the energy of connection in my words when I'm talking to them? How can I approach it and lead differently in the way that I am communicating with my children? And so now energy to me, it's like this North Star, and I can't unsee it anymore. I see how people lead their families. I see how people lead their teams. We see how people lead a country. And you see the ripple effect of that, of the energy that somebody embodies and then the culture that they create. So if we know this on a bigger scale, like we've literally witnessed this, we are culture creators in our home. And if it literally starts with managing energy, which is what we're all doing, we have impact and we have influence. I mean, something as simple as like flowers bring me joy. Yes. I don't have any in my room right now. The ones that are here are plastic because they'll die because it's like there's no sunlight in here. But like upstairs, I bought myself a huge thing of flowers from a local farm, and they came bigger than I thought they were going to be. I had so many, I started giving them away to my neighbors, but I have 3 vases or vases around the house. And every time I see them, I'm like, this is energy. Like you bring me joy. And that's what it's about. But old me, like old me would have been like, I'm not wasting money on that because I didn't have any. I didn't have any to give away, which is why time, energy, money, health, quality relationships, quality food, all of these, yes, they're a privilege. But when I'm focusing on how can I produce more, I'm not the only one who benefits.
Yeah. Yeah. This is brilliant. So you're so speaking my language and you've said so much. And I really want to highlight for everyone listening, if there was one takeaway today, I think that you're giving such a powerful paradigm shift. You're shifting us away from how am I spending these finite number of hours to how am I investing in the energy that I seek to feel. So this is a takeaway of takeaways. This is a very important conversation for women who are schlepping your kids around to summer camps. And we all do have this 24 hours in a day. But how do I want to feel in these 24 hours in my day? What is the energy in which I want to inhabit in the time that I have? To focus your awareness that we have dominion over the energy that we seek to embody. So I want everyone to hear this as a very important takeaway today. And this idea that taking care of yourself to inhabit the most fulfilled, rich energy is the last thing from selfish. I always say that to me, it's actually rather narcissistic not to take care of myself, because I can remember when Will was young, I can remember the days I wasn't taking care of myself. I couldn't give myself permission, hence the title, Permission to Thrive. I wasn't giving myself that permission yet. I was on the end of that list, just like you said, and then way too tired to do the things that my spirit was calling me to do. And so I would walk into a room and everyone knew I was annoyed. And then I was teaching everybody around me, walk on eggshells because mom's annoyed. And so even though I might not have said a word, my energy, like you're talking about, my energy was screaming to everyone, walk on eggshells, be careful. She might explode. She might yell. Who knows what's going to happen? That's very narcissistic. It was all about me. Even though I would say, oh no, I'm doing everything for you, I'm really in a very narcissistic energy. So I'm really encouraging anyone to be willing to consider that you taking care of yourself is the greatest gift you can give your children, your coworkers, your spouse. Me taking care of myself and investing that energy, greatest thing I can do for those around me. And I would love for you to speak on either how you started giving yourself permission to take that walk first, or how you assist a woman who's like, okay, Heather, I'm in. I want to take that walk. How do I actually go take it first?
Okay. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So when you are ready, you will do it. End of discussion. Like, you will do it. When you are done with your own bullshit, you will do the thing. I have seen time and time again where women have come to me and said, and I have had to do a lot of inner work here. My background is in social work. I will literally go to the ends of the earth to help people. And I did that to the detriment of my own health and also my business at the beginning, where I was like, oh, I want to save the world. I want to help everyone. I want everyone to know. And then I thought, wow, not everyone wants to feel good. So when you are done with your own bullshit, you will do it. You will go for the walk. It will be not fun and not easy or emotionally comfortable for you. The first time I gave myself permission to do the thing I wrote down on my list. So I tell people to use this journal prompt all the time. Wouldn't it be nice if? I don't want to know what your goals are. Wouldn't it be nice if I could go grocery shopping by myself? Something so simple. And then you're about to walk out the door and you're like, I'm going to go by myself. I just want quiet time. And then a kid starts crying, or your partner makes a passive aggressive comment, or you have to drop the kids off somewhere because you don't have anybody at home. You're like, I could never. Like, I used to drop my son off I used to pay the daycare at the gym, and I would just go sit in the sauna. I wouldn't even work out. And I was like, I get a freaking break. I felt so much guilt every time I did these things. I went to a cafe and I was still breastfeeding with one of my kids. I was sitting there journaling and I just started crying the whole time. And everyone's like, well, are you okay? And I was like, I don't know. I thought this was supposed to feel good. And what I realized is, having the courage to do the thing, I had this attachment that I was supposed to feel the thing immediately. Like, why don't I feel good? Right? It's like, I ate the good food. Why don't I feel great? Why doesn't my ass look better in these pants? Like, what's going on? But it's the compound effect. And that's the
Yes.
annoying part, because we're so conditioned to be all or nothing, that it's the compound effect of just do the damn thing. And so do it. Try not to be attached to the feeling, but knowing that you are reaching for that better feeling state. I don't think anyone has ever regretted going for a walk or doing those life enhancing things. And be really proud of yourself for honoring the commitment you made. I am more attracted and attached to showing up for the actual thing I said I'm going to show up for, rather than what the outcome is. And that is how you get courage. That's how you get confidence and self-trust.
Exactly. Just brilliantly said. It's like mic drop when you're done with your own bullshit. And I appreciate what you're saying, because again, I would reference it. The soul understands that when we go to that cafe, that there is an unlearning, that there is emotional discomfort, because it's part of our coming home to ourselves. In my humble experience, is the letting go of the indoctrinations, familial, culturally. And so that letting go of the indoctrinations is emotionally uncomfortable often. And so those feelings of guilt do arise, because they're layered upon. Your intuition knows, go to a cafe, it's going to feed your spirit, and then that's going to help feed you as a mom. But the cultural indoctrination is very heavy of, what the heck are you doing at a cafe at 10:30 in the morning when you could be with your child?
Cleaning or cooking or doing something else to be of service to everyone else but yourself.
Exactly.
And then we get into personal development and self-care, and we're like, well, and then we're still doing it for somebody else. Well, now I'm at this cafe because I know it's going to make me feel better. So that therefore I'm a better mom. Like, we're so conditioned and on a primal level, like nurturers, that I don't really think we're ever going to get rid of that part of ourselves, but it's a double-edged sword. If we are not managing it with caution, it's a blessing or it's a curse. Like, fire can keep you warm and it can also hurt you. Water will keep you hydrated. It can also harm you. So paying attention to this power, the superpower that we have as nurturers, that when we actually nurture ourselves, yes, we will better nurture everybody else.
Right. And this leads me to my last question for you, because in my journey of my own self-care, soul care, what I have realized is, it is in the showing up for myself that teaches my core self that I'm valuable and I'm worthy of my own time, even if it's a 10-minute walk around the block. I'm worthy of my own time. So showing up for myself trumps the feeling I'll get, because sometimes, like you were saying, maybe that whole walk was very uncomfortable and I was untangling some argument I had with my husband, or the whole time I was like, yeah, I could be doing something for my kid, or whatever that walk entailed. I'm not doing it for some good feeling as much as I'm doing it for showing up for myself, which teaches my core self that I'm valuable and I'm worthy. And I know you speak a lot, and we share this. I'm a personal development coach and I work with coaches building their businesses. And you speak a lot about standing in your value.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is I would be remiss to leave this conversation without including that. And I'm wondering if you want to speak to that.
Yeah. So this is actually really interesting to me. So I'm always like taking action, supporting people, and my message or work always evolves, right? And I'm looking at the patterns. And I can't believe, and I'm just curious what is here, because I started my journey as a parenting, I'm calling it a parenting coach. But really, what I realized is a lot of the children's behaviors that these parents were challenged with, two things were happening. One, they were judging the child so harshly, like unconsciously knowing it, but like, you need to be good. You need to sit down. You need to not do this. I was like, but look at the child in front of you is who they are. And we're like projecting our own frustrations onto them. And then the other thing that was happening is the parent was just so disconnected from themselves that of course they felt like they had no control. So they're trying to control the child. And I thought, okay, interesting, because as my work evolved, I was like, but we're doing that in business as well. Like, you're in a conversation, I'm going to call it sales conversation, but you're in a potential conversation with somebody. You're judging that person because they're like, I can't afford it. I got to talk to my partner, or blah, blah, blah. And then you're making it personal, and like you're projecting, or they're like, people won't buy my price. Right. And you're like, but why are you discounting yourself? Why are you shrinking yourself? Why are you abandoning yourself to please these other people? But you think it's money, but it's not really money. They're triggering like, oh, I can't afford that. They're saying you're not worthy of that. And then it just comes back to us. And so it's fascinating how they're both connected. Or being in a family unit and hearing women say, oh, my partner would never let me do that. And then watching people in a team setting and just like giving away their power to other people, or not using their voice. Like, it is all connected. Like, in my home now, today, my husband and I are partners, and I am the face of my brand and he is behind the scenes, and that's his personality. But if I want to do something, I communicate that with him, and vice versa. And he's most likely not on board with 99% of the things that I say, but I don't give up. And I say, let's talk about this. Like, I see the value in this. I'm like, this is something I really want to do. And what do you want to do? And blah, blah. Like, we take a stand for what we want and desire, instead of just saying, I could never bring that up. And I think we need to do that more in our work as well. We underestimate the value that we bring to people. We think, I'm not qualified, I don't have this, or I haven't been doing it for X amount of years, but we underestimate the value of holding space for someone. We underestimate the value of sharing our life experiences and resources for somebody. Just being a kind human that's like very networked and can really take a stand for people. And you can't do that if you don't value yourself at a primal level. I see it over again and again. I'm like, you want to make more money, and yet you're in a relationship that you know you need to leave, but you won't take a stand for yourself. This person is walking all over you. And look, your clients are doing the same too.
Exactly. The word value, the quality of what it feels like to value ourself as a woman, as a being. And that comes from generations. I think just 100 years ago, we couldn't even vote. So there is a lot of lineage of learning not to value ourselves and martyring ourselves. And so what you're speaking of, if each one listening could leave here with one small way that you would be willing to stretch into a value. Like you said, maybe your partner is coming back at you and discounting something you say, and you just choose, well, today I'm going to speak
Hmm.
and put my voice into the arena. Just today, put my voice. Maybe I am going to actually, maybe I can't go for a 5 mile hike. Maybe I'm going to go for a 5 minute walk around my neighborhood. Maybe I'm going to just walk out the back door and put my feet on the grass today. If there is something that is small enough that you can actually be true to yourself, even if it's walking into the backyard and putting your feet on the ground, you will be starting to train yourself of what it actually feels like to value ourselves. And I don't think there is a more important conversation for women to have. This is a whole nother episode, which I'll have you back. We'll have a whole different episode. I just wanted to highlight the importance of us, and it can start in the smallest of ways. I think that what I'm hearing you say, just to wrap it all up, is I've heard you twice or three times maybe talk about both and that. So your husband may not see the value, and you might speak up for the value also. So the way I'm hearing it is finding ways to move from a state of lack where it's like either or, it's either his way or my way, and you're moving into a state of abundance, which would be a both and. Yeah, he might not see the value, and it's okay for me to speak up about the value.
Yeah.
So important. Clearly, we could talk all day. I know you have another appointment, so I'm going to honor your time. All of your information, including your beautiful podcast, Emotionally Uncomfortable, are in the show notes. Is there anything, though, that you would either like to leave everyone with, or anything particular that you have going on that you would just like to let everyone know about?
I hang out a lot on the podcast. And if you go to my website, just Heather Chauvin, CHAUVIN.com, you'll see I have two other private podcasts as well, one for parenting and one for business. But yeah, just follow the little breadcrumbs. You will never be pushed in the wrong direction. Just be open and curious. And I tell people all the time, the secret you're looking for is more of you, like adding more of you to your life. It feels really scary, but the more courage you have to go after the thing that you want and desire, that is literally the secret that we are all searching for in a business book, a parenting book, a health book. The better you feel, the more magic happens.
The better you feel, the more magic happens. Thank you so much. I would personally like to just highlight for everyone Dying to Be a Good Mother, Heather's book. First of all, her website is on the show notes, so just click there. It's a clickable link. Dying to Be a Good Mother is a read for every woman on planet Earth. Please get that book, because we literally just scratched the surface today. And I have had the pleasure of just knowing you over the years and watching your incredible blossoming. And so speaking to you today and having everyone now be introduced to you and get to know you is just such a privilege and a pleasure. And I'm so honored to both know you as a friend, but also as a colleague. You've taken your own journey and are using it in service to others. And I just think that's just the greatest use of a life. So thank you.
Thank you, Suzi. I so appreciate you. And I'm just so incredibly grateful we got to meet what is almost like a decade ago. So thank you.
Yeah. Much love to you and much love to everyone. And give yourself permission to thrive this week. Much love, and see you next week. I hope that you are leaving inspired and on fire to take that one next stretch to truly value yourself, to truly consider focusing more on your energy than on your time. If there was anything in this episode that touched you, that spoke to you, I would so personally appreciate it if you would subscribe to Permission to Thrive and leave a 5-star review. You have no idea how much your review and your subscription will assist this to reach many more people on planet Earth who really need this message to give themselves permission to thrive in their lives. So much love, everyone, and see you next week. Thank you so much for listening. If there was something in this conversation that spoke to you, we'd so appreciate it if you would take the time to subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and share this episode with women and mothers you know, because you are here to thrive. See you next time.